So Dash 2.5 just came out with this announcement.
Yeah, 2.5, Adam. Really excited about it. Two really big features that, kind of go back to some of the core architecture of Dash. There's multi-page applications and there is component properties.
Yeah, and as soon as one of the Plotly colleagues was telling me that they were working on pages together with Anne, our community member, I was like, I knew from a few months ago when we started, this is going to be a big thing because we could always create a multi-page app with Dash, and it wasn't too difficult. But Pages makes it even easier and
hmm
a lot more convenient. Something about the callback that it abstracts it. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, let me just share my screen and talk you through a little bit about it.
Cool.
So, yeah, um, in the first year of Dash, started thinking about how we were going to support multi-page applications, um, and one of the early ideas was that multi-page applications could be built by having a component that represents the URL bar in a Dash app, and that's where we had um, the DCC location component. So dcc.location, this represents the location bar in a browser. And one of the early ideas was, well, that can just be a component. And when that URL changes, either when you click on a link or if you visit that application directly, um, the properties around that URL, like the path name or the full URL, the href, or just the anchor link or the query parameters, those are all, we could consider them properties of the URL. And then you could build multi-page applications that update the content on the page based off of the URL parameter. So in a way, it fit really nicely with Dash in the very beginning of just let's make URLs a component, and
Yep.
then you can update pages and content on the page just by using Dash callbacks. So that's the sort of the status quo for a long time, for the last few years. So you'd
I
write
remember that.
this.
I built many apps this way with the callback and adding the location and the path. It wasn't difficult. It was just I had to write all this out every single time I built an app.
Yep, exactly. And I think what we started to see too was, you'd write these callbacks and, if you might have some other page, href equals, historical analysis. Um, then you might include your components in here. Um, and some people's code would get really onerous because they would have several different layouts within this callback, right? I mean, here's just a div, but in reality, a page of representing a Dash app, you're going to have a bunch of different components.
Right.
So we offered some suggestions about how to refactor your code so that this is a little bit more manageable, where each of these different pages you would put in a folder. We would call that folder pages, and then import that, and then put it in here. And that was sort of became the pattern about pages. And one of the things that we tried to do with this new feature was let's make that pattern a little bit more official by making the pages directory the actual way that you create these pages, and sort of take this pattern that we have here and encapsulate it within the framework itself, so that you don't need to write this callback here, and so that you can write your code in a way that is really well organized, and you get a bunch of other really nice features for free, which we can show you in a little bit of a demo. But yeah, do you want to take us through what it looks like in the new version?
Yeah, for sure, Chris. Thank you. That's a good explanation of the background behind Pages. So I did prepare a demo of Pages. Let me share my screen here. Okay, so you should be able to see this multi-page app demo. This was built by our community member Anne, who was leading the Pages initiative of the new feature. And you can see here that we have 3 separate pages: heat map, bar chart, and let me actually start it right there. go. So you can see we have 3 separate pages here. And this is our multi-page app. And each page is an interactive page in itself with a drop-down or a slider or a checklist. And
Mhm.
everything here is inside this folder, multi-page app example 1. You can see that the folder structure is very simple. We have a pages folder that has all the different pages, the bar chart, heat map, histogram, and then a not found page, which is a message we want to show users if they click the wrong, put the wrong text in the URL. And then we have the app page, which ties everything together and brings all the 3 pages together onto one main page.
Mhm.
So, so there's way too much code here for this video to go over each and every line of code. But what I do want to highlight is the most important things to keep in mind when you are building your multi-page app with pages, or if you're converting your multi-page app into pages. And Chris, feel free to jump in here if
Mm.
you want to add to anything or if you felt I missed anything. So let's just focus on the heat map page. This is our first page. Whenever we load the app, you'll see a heat map with a checklist that updates the heat map itself. And this is done through this heatmap.py file, which is inside the pages folder. And as you can see here, this looks almost like a regular Dash app. You have
Mhm.
the layout, you have the callback. The only difference, there's 3 differences here that I want you to be aware of when you're building your multi-page app with pages. First of all, you want to register your page like this. So you have to put this line of code dash.register_page. And as always, an underscore named underscore. And then path, you don't necessarily always need. You don't have it here in the histogram page. You don't have it in the bar chart page. But we do have it here because this is a way to indicate what will be our home page, or what will be the first page that the user lands on when they first load or refresh the page.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think if you like kind of look at this code and then you compare to what I was showing earlier with that callback, what's really nice about this pattern is that that register page is associated with the page content itself, right? So in the previous way that we were organizing our code, you would write a callback, and that callback would have a bunch of conditional statements that would be based off of the URL of the page, and then you'd load different content that might be loaded in different um, files within your project.
Right.
And I really like this pattern where we have the path declared within the page content itself, because it's really easy to see that relationship between which URL is loading which content. This is sort of a pattern that we adopted from GitHub pages, which is uses the Jekyll framework, which is built out of the Ruby community. And in GitHub pages, you write these markdown files, and at the top of the markdown file, you have this YAML front matter, and that front matter contains things about the URL of that content. And that's something that we were inspired by when building this feature. It's just a really nice way to organize your code. And if we go to that name thing, underscore name. So the reason we have that is that that refers to the file name of um, the that this piece of code is within. So underscore name evaluates to heatmaps.py here. And that's like this, we use that in a bunch of different ways within this feature, so that you can look up in the page registry different data about this particular page, but also so that in other pages, if you omit path equals, then we look at the file name and we will use that file name as the URL. So in this case here, underscore name underscore is this like thing that's built into Python that refers to the file name. It'll evaluate to histograms.py. And we use that under the hood to then create like sort of, guess what a nice URL would be, which would just be /histograms. You can override that with path, but this is just sort of a way that we wanted to provide some really nice default behavior to create a multi-page application without needing to define all of these things like every path, at least to get started. You can
Right.
override later, but at least
Right.
to get started.
That's kind of cool. Thanks, Chris. I actually never knew why we have to add the name inside the page registry or inside like a regular app when we instantiate the app. And this really helps. Thank you. So remember, in each page, you have you have to register the page, and then the other two things, there are small differences from a regular Dash app. The layout is no longer app.layout like we are used to. It is just a regular variable or a function. In this case, it's a variable. And the third thing you want to remember when you're creating every single page is that the callback is also not app.callback. It's either dash.callback or directly imported here from Dash and then just used as at callback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in a little bit of background on that, that was one of the things that made this feature a little bit challenging to write, was that we didn't want to, if you imported callback from app, or if you had app.callback, then you run into all these circular import errors.
Right.
Because the pages, the app.py file itself needs to import the layout of all of these different files. But if you're importing the app object, and then the app.py file is also importing the layout objects from these files, you run into this circular import error. So a lot of work actually went into building this feature and just bringing a lot of these methods that were attached to the app object into the Dash namespace, so that you could have dash.callback or just from dash import callback, and you wouldn't need to import the app object. So we've done that with a bunch of different methods within Dash, like get asset URL is no longer attached to the app object. It's part of the Dash module. And that allows us to write these applications that don't need to import app, which helps make writing these applications a lot simpler. Previously, without this, you need to declare the app object in a separate file. You might have seen examples that had like index.py instead of app.py. It's just a little bit of mental gymnastics that we wanted to abstract away.
In other words, after hours and hours and weeks of work from our engineering team and our community, you're seeing something a lot simpler thanks to all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have these 3 pages. Now, once you understand how to build these 3 pages, these 3 differences, the only thing you need to do is to create your main app.py file, which brings everything together. Here, I also want to highlight 3 different things to keep in mind when you are building your app.py file with pages. Make sure to declare use pages equals true here where you instantiate your app. Also, make sure to add the content wherever you want the content of each and every single page to appear on the browser. You want to include that content, or you want to include this sentence dash dot page underscore container in that section of the layout. So for example, you take a look at this, you build a nav bar on your main app page right here. We're building our nav bar with a drop-down menu. And we know in this case that we want all the content of every single page, depending on the link that is clicked on, to appear under the nav bar. That is why we put the nav bar in the layout. We put the nav bar first, and then the dash.page container under it. This indicates to the app where we want the page content to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is another really cool part, I think, about Dash, where you have this sort of outer frame, and you've got this sort of inner frame of where the content's rendered. That gives you a lot of flexibility. Like you can throw in a store here, and then that store can be shared between each of the different pages, for example. Or as you mentioned, the nav bar, it's rendered once, and then the callback is just replacing the content underneath the nav bar. You could also put that nav bar in each of the pages themselves,
Right.
but in different for different reasons, you might want to just have it shared, or it's often easier to think about and to structure your code that way. And you don't need to repeat the nav bar in every single page. It's sort of declared once.
Right. And then so the last thing on the app.py file is the links, right? How does the app know which page to content to display? And in this case, we're using the Dash Bootstrap drop-down menu, which has, if you click Control left click, it has an H href, which means you can pass a URL to it. So you don't have to use this. You can use a DCC link. You can use it off canvas. You can just use a regular sidebar. Anything that has, or HTML, anything that has a href in it as a property is something that you can use. In this case, we're using the drop-down menu, and we're saying for each page inside the dash page registry, which is, each one of these that we defined before, for each page inside of that, for those values, if the page module equals or doesn't equal page not found 404, this is the name of the 404 file. If it doesn't equal that, then create an item inside each drop-down menu that has the name, the page name, and it has the page path. That is why when you go here, you'll see the page name, and the page path is obviously hidden, meaning when you click on it, it will just show up. So that's an easy way to add your links to the drop-down menu or nav bar and off-canvas, whatever you want, a DCC link in order to display the content of your pages.
Yeah, and if you open up the barcharts.py file and we look at that register page call, notice that that we're not actually just saying that this page is called bar charts. Like the link that you see in that header is, capital B bar space charts. And this is just another way that under the hood, we're pulling out this name, which references the file name, bar_charts.py. And then we automatically create a default name for that link where we remove the underscores, we capitalize the first letter, we remove the .py, and that becomes like the name of the link, which will appear in this case in the header. But then if you look at the URL, it's bar-charts. So we do some things under the hood to come up with like a good default link here where we change the underscores to hyphens. We lowercase everything, remove the .py. So these are just like some kind of like, a bit of nice stuff that happens under the scenes, like providing some nice defaults. All of those things are overridable. As your application goes into production, it can be a good thing to declare those things, put the name equals, put the path equals. That way, when you change the file name of your code, if you're ever refactoring, that doesn't end up changing your links or your URLs inadvertently. But to get started, just really nice to have a set of defaults here that the framework provides for you automatically.
Agreed. Where is I just stopped sharing screen? Great. Yeah, it's incredible because there's so many different options. I showed you a basic multi-page app with pages, but you have many more examples. Look in the post. We share a few examples there and links to different resources where you can learn more about the pages. I will also add it under the video, but also take advantage of our Dash documentation. Chris, if you don't mind opening the Dash documentation link, in the Dash documentation, we have a lot of information about many different things, but especially about pages, because what we showed you is just a tip of the iceberg. Like there's so many different things you can do with the Dash documentation with pages, and it's all in there. Let me add Chris's thing to the stream. Perfect. So here you see the Dash pages. We'll have this link under the video as well. So you can explore, you can either do like Chris is doing, like just scroll down, or you have on the right sidebar, you have different links to what you can see, and it explains many, many different things. I personally really I'd love to hear, Chris, like what you like the most about pages or what you are proud of the most. But what I really like is the opportunity to like can add meta links where you can just, you just in the description itself, in the register page itself, exactly right there, you can just define the title, the description, and the image, which will be pulled from the assets folder. And then anytime you share your app's link, let's say on Twitter or on LinkedIn, it would already be shared with the title, the description, and an image of your app, which is very, very cool.
Yeah, I really like this feature too. And I think this is just like an example of building a basic application, multi-page application with DCC.location before was, it was relatively easy, but there was a lot of additional nice to have features to make your multi-page application really polished. And meta tags is a perfect example of that. Sharing on social media is a big is one big use case here, but also like even if you're just sharing within, sending an email with a link to your application or sharing it in Slack. Um, Programs like that will like unfurl the URL and they'll show a little image and they'll show a little description of it. And you can control what that image looks like and what that description looks like. And you can specify that within the register page. So this is just a nice thing, like under the hood, we're templating this into the underlying HTML that's part of the page that gets loaded. You could have done this before with methods like interpolate index to override the HTML that's loaded on page load. But adding up all these different things, meta tags, passing in query strings, variable paths, all these different features are tied in really nicely into this new API of dash.register page. So yeah, kind of no, I think what I like about this feature is there's like almost no extraneous code that you need to write. A lot of this stuff is really declarative and simple. And I don't think it could be written in any way that could be made in a more simple way. Setting
Yep.
the title, the description, there's just single keywords associated with that page. So yeah, feels like a really nice tight API.
And it makes it easier. Chris, you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but it makes it even easier to create fully fledged web apps in Python just by using Dash. You don't have to build just dashboards, analytic dashboards. You can build many more things with multi-page app using pages.
Yeah, that's right. And URLs are so great. They're so user friendly. You can have an application, like this where there's these path parameters, and this path could refer to, a different instrument that you're measuring, signals off of. It could refer to, a different drug that you're running clinical trials on. And instead of having the user click through the dashboard to filter down, like you can create a really nice page that like shows you everything about that particular item of interest. And that's just a really nice user friendly thing, and a beautiful thing about web pages. And I really hope to see more people create Dash applications that are structured in that way. Instead of having everything really dense on one page, think about expanding out your content into multiple pages. And that can, make your application feel a little bit more user friendly, a little bit less dense with information. You can share a unique URL to a particular thing that you're interested in. And this Dash register pages makes that super simple. You pass in this little sort of template of the URL, and then that gets passed into your layout function. So there's it doesn't really get much simpler than this from an API perspective.
Yep. So now that you know how easy it is to create a multi-page app with Dash, I would recommend, I know Chris would recommend as well, create more pages. If you have your multi-page app before pages, we recommend trying to convert it using pages. If you have not created a multi-page app before, now is your opportunity to create a multi-page app using pages and share it with us. We would love to see it. Go to the forum, click on the show and tell tag, and just share your apps with us. Share the code if you can, so other people can learn. Put it on YouTube, put it on social media. We'll highlight it as well. We'll share it. We want other people to know, not only people who are watching this video, but other people to know how easy it is to create a multi-page app with Dash.
Definitely. Yeah. And thanks to everybody in the community who gave us feedback on early versions of this feature. We developed this out in the open in the community. Big thanks to Anne-Marie, who is a community member who did a lot of the development of this feature under our mentorship. So really nice to see this get across the finish line. And thanks to everybody who's been involved in the process.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. Bye,
Great.
everybody.
Thanks, Adam. Bye.